Welcome to Slandertown. I'm your host, Dan Novak, joined with my co-host, Tanvidal Sangarkar. Our motto and creed is no beef too petty. No, no, wait. Did I reverse it again? There you
You
go.
gotta know what your motto and creed is.
I always forget it. Okay. Welcome to Slandertown, a blog and podcast devoted to First Amendment slugfests. No beef too small, no lawsuit too petty. That is our creed and our motto. I'm Dan Novak. I'm joined by my erstwhile co-host Tanvidal Sangarkar, making a long-awaited return to the co-host chair. And today we have a special guest, Matthew Schaefer, an expert in First Amendment law and private practice at Jassy, Vick, and Carolyn. We're going to talk about something really exciting today, which is a lawsuit involving, it's an international libel lawsuit involving the First Lady of France, Brigitte Macron, who has sued provocateur and podcaster extraordinaire Candace Owens for, well, a host of accusations, but among them, most salacious, that Miss Owens has asserted on many occasions that Macron is actually a man, was born genetically male, has adopted, stolen the identity of someone else, and has been living I guess, I don't know, many decades long lie. And on top of that has been, I think, there's a lot of stuff going on in Switzerland, but there's some kind of assassination subplots and other intrigue. But for our purposes, I wanted to focus on this allegation that that living a lie and not being genetically female is somehow a defamatory accusation to make against someone. I should note that Macron is represented by Tom Clare of the Clare Locke firm, which is a prominent plaintiff's bar frequent flyer in the defamation space. But this case is not without precedent. So let's talk about it. Tanvi, we were talking pre-show about a case from almost 10 years ago where it has a somewhat similar fact pattern.
Yeah, we were talking about the case of Simmons versus American media, where Richard Simmons was misidentified as being transgender or was written about as undergoing a sex change or getting ready to undergo a sex change. Um, and he
Allegedly.
allegedly, and he sued for defamation, claiming that these statements about him were harmful to his reputation. I think like during the argument, American media argued that misidentifying a party as transgender has no natural tendency to injure one's reputation. And the court actually agreed with American media, saying that the similarities between being transgender and other immutable characteristics like race, gender, you know, they being misidentified as transgender is not libelous per se because it falls within the category of these immutable characteristics. And basically to hold that calling someone transgender is defamatory just because the person that's being written about or their specific community kind of views that as being negative or something that is defamatory would actually be the court lending credence or legitimacy to the idea that being transgender or being from a certain class or certain set of people that has those characteristics is actually um, second class, as the court called it in the opinion.
So I should disclose, I was actually counsel at American Media at the time, and internally I always thought of it as the, not that there's anything wrong with it defense for those Seinfeld fans out there. It was an interesting case, and I should add that Simmons also pled false light, which is not a factor in New York, but is in California. It's the kind of um, unfavored kind of cousin of defamation law. And in that case, I think Simmons tried something that we'll see in this Macron case, a similar gambit, which is, well, look, there's nothing wrong with being transgender, but that's not me. That's not my lived experience. And it's harmful for me to hear about me being spoken about in a way that doesn't reflect my life. It's emotional anguish, etc. But again, Tanvi, you hit the nail on the head. The court decided that it wouldn't effectuate the prejudice of a small group of people, and it grounded that analysis in a line of cases involving different disfavored groups, going back in history, homosexuals for one, but going further back, even accusations back in the day against people that they were particularly African American. So there's actually a kind of a lineage here, and it tracks with kind of, I would say, the disfavored group of any particular era. Um, but it's that workaround that I think is most interesting to me here. And so, another case where that was attempted and also failed was the Mike Lindell, My Pillow CEO case against the Daily Mail for saying that he was in a clandestine romance with the actress Jane Krakowski from 30 Rock, and that he was plying her with gifts of alcohol and other goodies that he said went against his teetotaling lifestyle. Matt, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, I think it raises a few different issues. So, I mean, your brief summary is basically correct. The article didn't, for example, say that Mike Lindell was drinking or was himself drinking, but rather said that he had, as part of this like courtship, essentially, that he had sent her bottles or bottles, do we know?
I think it was bottles or a bottle.
Of champagne, and the court basically said no right-thinking person would ascribe, irrespective of Lindell's like past, no right-thinking person would ascribe any, nefariousness to that. We see in defamation law this, it's like who can put, the most adjectives into a sentence. So things like, does the allegation cause public hatred or shame or odium or contempt or ridicule or aversion or ostracism or degradation or disgrace or induces an evil opinion of someone, yada, yada, yada. But interestingly, like all of those things, whatever word we decide to choose, are all things that are centered on the person who actually hears the defamatory allegation. It's not things internal to the person about whom the defamatory allegation is being made, right? So you cannot bring a claim uh, in an actionable claim in any event in defamation on the basis of this really hurt my feelings. And that is where I think the false light claims in those jurisdictions that recognize that tort become kind of placeholder claims because it's really a tacit admission on the plaintiff's behalf. Like, I can't make out a bona fide defamation claim, so I'm going to plead a false light claim.
Yeah, because he's not saying he's done something wrong. He's saying, or accused of any wrongdoing. He's saying, well, people will think I'm a hypocrite. People will think I'm a liar and a fraud because I talk the talk about temperance and not doing drugs or alcohol. I mean, in the context here, Mike Lindell is an admitted former crack addict. I mean, he was in the throes of some very serious addictions, and so people might be worried about him if he were using again. But he's not even accused of drinking himself. He's just giving nice gifts. But he couched this, well, I would never foist alcohol on another person as though every other person is struggling with his, specific demons. But again, it comes down to you're not calling me a drunk, but you're calling me a hypocrite, and that's got to hurt, right? And I think about, it doesn't feel good for people not to understand you, but that's not what defamation law is for. It's not to feel seen or understood. It's to protect your reputation, ability to do business and interact in the public square. And Mike Lindell has a lot of problems in those arenas nowadays, but it's not from dating allegedly Jane Krakowski, which, by the way, I've always maintained if that article was defamatory towards anyone, it would be Jane Krakowski because she's very cool, and that would be slumming it for her to date him. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I can't recall. In the Lindell case, did he allege that the defamatory statements caused professional harm though? Because isn't his My Pillow product, he kind of catered it toward a more conservative fan base that might have viewed.
He also has a
Yeah.
foundation about drug abuse recovery and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So he's like, it
Hmm.
hurts my ability to do that. Of course,
Right.
they never present any evidence of this.
Right. Okay. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
And the
So
article never says anything about
No,
the
it doesn't.
foundation. And like Dan noted, there's plenty of, as with us all, there's plenty of demons in Mike Lindell's past. But the court dropped a footnote early on saying, like, notably, he doesn't bring any claims relating to all of this other seemingly bad stuff that's in the article. He just brings the one claim on this. This makes me look like a hypocrite.
Hmm.
But I think it raises in all of these, like, this genre of case, especially the Simmons case, raises the question of this very 19th century language in which we talk about defamation, which is who is the right thinking person, right? Because it's all about an evil opinion in the minds of right thinking people. And I haven't gone back and looked at this, but I assume that the right thinking person today is not the same as how they thought of the right thinking person in 1831. But like you see this in other contexts too, where there's a case out in Colorado, an inmate, I think it was A&E, had ascribed to an inmate that he was a member of the Aryan Brotherhood or one of these like racist neo-Nazi type groups. And in fact, he was like a member of another one, or he was a member of the group, but like through an affiliate or something like that. And it might have been Justice Gorsuch. I'd have to go back and look, but wrote an opinion that was basically like, or no, sorry, I'm confusing two separate cases. That case exists. There's a separate case where it says another inmate, maybe it's the same case. I don't know. Do you guys know which case I'm
What's
talking about?
no, but what's the bottom line?
So the bottom line, yes, let's get to the bottom line. So the bottom line is basically like people are going to think that I'm an informer because there was an allegation that he had,
Well, I
whoever this.
remember this one. All the cases where it's like, don't call me a cooperator, and the judge is like, cooperating with the police is the highest ideal. Like you can't, that can't be
Right. And so but
defamatory.
it's like
Yeah.
the same thing, right? Because the
Yeah.
courts are always saying a right-thinking person would not think,
Yeah.
maybe your prison population, maybe that creates problems for you to be labeled an
Mhm.
informant, but right-thinking people, which I guess is not the population of prisoners, apparently, is or are not going to think less of you because you
Yeah,
cooperated
because
with
the
them.
reasonable person defamation law is both normative and descriptive, and how much of one column A and the other column B on a given situation, it depends on the facts. And I think that's the reality of it is that in the Simmons case, it was pretty hard to show that he'd actually been harmed. He didn't like what people wrote about him. That sucks, but that's kind of the price of fame that we have in the United States. Lindell, the same. There's one case I want to bring up very briefly because I think it's interesting, kind of a counter example, which is the E. Jean Carroll case, her very first defamation case against Donald Trump. Before the statute of limitations was extended in New York so that she could bring an actual sexual battery claim against him, her first lawsuit against him was for defamation. And what the locus of that lawsuit was that she had accused him of sexual assault, and he said she's a liar, it's a con job, and he went after her. So really, all she accused him of, excuse me, what the defamation was in denying her allegation against him, right? And calling her a liar. Not saying that she wasn't the one accused of the bad behavior. She's accused of lying and misrepresenting. The same way I think Macron, and to a degree, Simmons and Lindell are accused of misrepresentation. Now, she was successful. I think one difference here is that the underlying behavior that she's accused of lying about is very bad behavior, falsifying, a sexual assault claim, right? So but this is the gray area that we're living in, and I think there's no real body of law that we can look to other than these kind of constellation of examples. So I don't know what will happen. Stay tuned for Macron versus Owens, but it definitely touches upon some pretty interesting ideas about whose opinions matter the most in a courtroom. Any closing thoughts, Tanvi?
No closing thoughts from me so far. I'm just waiting to see. I know Candace Owens has filed a motion to dismiss, but that's more based on personal jurisdiction, because they sued in Delaware and she's claiming that they don't have personal jurisdiction
And
over
wouldn't it
her.
stink if we don't get to find out the answer because this is no jurisdiction? What does that
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, I was trying to find if there was any other motions that she had filed that substantively answered the claims. I couldn't find it, and hopefully we're able to answer that question.
Maybe we'll get her on the show next
Yeah.
time. Matt, I'll give
I
you the
did,
last word, Matt.
yeah, so because I can't let things go, I went and looked, and I was in fact conflating two separate cases. It was Gorsuch, the different case. It was Gorsuch, and he says, "Can you win damages in a defamation suit for being called a member of the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang on cable television when, as it happens, you have merely conspired with the Brotherhood in a criminal enterprise?" And the answer to that question was no.
Thank you for resolving the suspense. I think that was
Of
something that
course.
was going to be weighing on a lot of our listeners. Um, this has been a bite-sized episode. We're trying to do them more quickly to meet this insatiable demand for more beefs, more petty lawsuits, more slander town. So, catch us for the next one. All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.